In the roll call of scientific pioneers, few names will summon the passionate controversy as that which surrounds B.F. Skinner. His work has led to the formulation of the science of human behavior, which finds behavior to be predictable, therefore controllable. And for this, he has been both applauded and attacked. The science of behavior is based on the principles of operant conditioning. These principles and their practice have recently become known as behavior modification, sacrilege to some because it has to do with methods by which man can shape the behavior of others. But far from being a scheme to control people without their knowledge, it allows man to study and analyze behavior and to apply its healing potential to such fields as education, medicine, and psychology. Though one might call Skinner a pioneer, the science of behaviorism actually began with the first men who walked the earth. Curious to explain their own ways, they attributed their moods to the tides, the divine soul, the position of the stars, and even to the work of demons. But it wasn't until Aristotle that human behavior was actually classified, his observations organized into categories such as sight, smell, hearing, appetite, and passion. After Aristotle, the study of behavior lay dormant for nearly 2,000 years. Dark ages in which man's destiny was left to the mystical realm of spirit and soul. But in 1600, Descartes challenged these medieval concepts, perceiving the body as a machine, which often responded in automatic and predictable ways. Then in the 1800s, Charles Darwin proposed his theory of evolution, suggesting that more could be learned about the behavior of man through the study of his predecessors, the lower animals of the earth. And two men separately began experiments based on Darwin's revolutionary precepts. Ivan Pavlov, who elicited conditioned reflexes from laboratory animals by varying their environmental conditions, and Edward Thorndike, who used a system of problem-solving devices to observe and measure animal behavior. It was John B. Watson who finally formalized the School of Behavioral Psychology, stressing objective study and the prediction and control of all animal behavior, with no special preference for the behavior of man. Now, drawing upon the work of all who preceded him, B.F. Skinner developed the first completely controlled environment, the Skinner box, and was able to standardize experiments in behavior to a degree never before possible. So well defined did his work become that he was able to discard traditional human concepts such as mind, soul, and the human spirit, isolating behavior as its own entity, separate from all other aspects of life.
Chance has played a very great part in anything I've ever discovered.
Well, the pigeon was always right.
I
remember the first year you were constantly telling me when I'd tell you how the experiment should go, and you'd say, now, wait, let the pigeon tell you.
That's right. The pigeon did tell us, of course. And that's why I've said that really our behavior was shaped by the pigeons much more than vice versa.
Yes.
Pigeons taught us much more than we ever taught them.
Now, I'm going to use this switch to operate the magazine, to reinforce the pigeon for doing something, and you will, I trust, see this effect on the pigeon. Now, if I were just to hand the pigeon some food, that would be a delayed sort of reinforcement, but instead the pigeon has been already conditioned to turn and go and eat when this light flashes and when the sound of the magazine is heard. Now, that flash of light and sound can be made almost simultaneous with the behavior that I want to produce. And we're going to try another pigeon now, and I will try to pick out some particular pattern of behavior and make it a more frequent part of the repertoire of the bird. Very fine. This bird has been already conditioned to eat when the magazine sounds and the light flashes. Now we'll just watch its behavior a bit. It's not doing anything in particular, you see, but I'm going to try to get it to do something. Suppose I shape up the behavior of making a complete turn. What I do is simply, as I did then, to wait for some part of that behavior. There's more of it, you see. You can see that the effect is instantaneous. I'm waiting for it to turn counterclockwise now. And then I reinforce that movement. And I wait for a more pronounced movement than that. It's got to be more than that. There we go, all the way around.
This thing in the operant condition is you have to have conditioned a pigeon. There's a sense of power that you get when you press a button and can produce total control in this animal's behavior. And I think this sense of power is particularly important to some kinds of people. Now, the power can move in many directions, the sense you get from this power. One direction it can move is the intellectual power of being able to think about behavior analytically, about human conduct analytically. The other direction is the personal sense that I pushed this button and I made him do what I wanted to do. And I think those two are rather closely tied and really an issue which cannot be evaded.
As for Skinner himself, he is totally disinterested in the aspect of personal power, applying behaviorism instead to a clearer understanding of man and the environment of his everyday life.
Many psychologists of any orientation believe that Skinner is the most influential psychologist in the last 50 years. Professor Skinner.
Thank you very much. Although behaviorism is basically a philosophy, the philosophy of a science of behavior, it is of immediate practical importance. In the first place, it shows us how often we look in the wrong places for explanations of behavior and hence for solutions to our problems. It is amazing how often we simply make up explanations and are not aware that we're doing so. Here's an example. A recent issue of a news weekly had a page article by David Lilienthal in which he argued that what America needs today is more confidence and less fear. And he cited the history of the Tennessee Valley Authority to prove his point. Before the valley was developed, the land had lost its fertility, the soil was slipping away, the forests were almost destroyed. When the dams were built, electric power and fertilizers made it possible for the people to try new methods, to earn more money, and to make the valley green again. But Lilienthal insists that the change was due to restored confidence. It seems to be obvious it was due to the dams. With dams and with electric power and fertilizer, people could now do things that they couldn't do before. And of course, a feeling of confidence went along with that. But confidence didn't produce the behavior produced the confidence. And if, as Lilienthal argues, what we need in America today is more confidence and less fear, we're not going to get it by setting about establishing confidence. No one has any idea how to do this. What we have some idea about is how we could change the world in America today so that more people can do things effectively. And in doing them, they will have feelings of confidence. But don't look for confidence to solve the problem. Look for the environmental changes.
And I think part of his genius lies in his ability to take things that you hold very private to yourself and to conceptualize what some of the variables might be in his language. So he'll hook you on the problem that you've already thought about. He'll translate the problem into his terms, and you find the whole thing is rotated in space, and you now see it differently. You did not see it that way before. To be able to communicate in that way is really a sign of genius. And so I would say that Skinner's contribution lies in the interpretations he made of existing simple ideas. One aspect of your writing that fascinated me, and very early in my career, were your comments about aggression. And it seemed to me that you were taking a position that was antithetical to the position that most of us are trained to adopt in this culture, that is, that aggression is something implicit in the nature of man, and that we're basically evil and destructive. But you're suggesting that there are reinforcers for aggressive behavior would suggest a very important counter to that, namely that it's possible that some cultures teach aggression, and that there are specific reinforcers and so on for that.
Well, yes, I don't deny that there is a certain amount of behavior which is part of the genetic endowment that could be called aggressive. I think running away is as important, I think, as attack. And these things have had a long time to be acquired by the species, and I think have been. I think also we have acquired the capacity to be reinforced by signs of aggressive damage worked on others, because that has made a person more effective in defending himself and his possessions and maintaining his own life. So that probably, just as we are reinforced by food in the mouth, by sexual contact, we probably are reinforced when we work aggressive damage on others. This would be something which has been of benefit to the species, and there it is. But we have not, so far as I can see, acquired a very elaborate aggressive repertoire. We don't inherit making war. War is a very specific repertoire which we acquire, and if we happen to belong to a culture in which that kind of thing is reinforced.
One of the exciting and possibly even grandiose features or sides of B.F. Skinner's work is his talk about an operant society, and indeed even an operant world. That is to say, a world of human beings in which we didn't get people and nations to do the right thing because they'd be punished, but because of the rewards. I suppose in ethical language what he's talking about is an international order based on an ethic of enlightened self-interest. Now, the great problem, and I don't believe he's helped us much with it, is the political problem involved, namely how you go about, practically speaking, to bring the nations of the world to recognize that ultimately, if not immediately, their own self-interest is best served by cooperating together at a high level of moral values and cooperation. You've used the term design. Now, I have a quarrel with you. Let's see how valid it is. I suspect you of talking about our need to design life as if somehow or other it really were possible to do so. Surely you could design things by behavior modification in a small, controlled community like your Walden 2. But what about the real world, Dr. Skinner? Is much of our talk about designing things really very practical?
Oh, I quite agree that to take the world as a whole, we can't
make all of these changes at once and bring about something like a generalized Walden II over the whole country. But I don't give up on the piecemeal design of practices, cultural practices.
In his book Walden II, Skinner lays out the blueprint for a very special kind of society, a commune in which the problems of education, childcare, and work incentives are handled not piecemeal as in our world, but in a single package, which he calls the operant society.
Well, I had to face some problems he didn't have to face. I didn't have the skill to write the poetry he wrote, of course. Walden I is certainly a far better book than Walden II.
Yes.
But I think basically, the idea is comparable. You do not accept necessarily what tradition is handing down to you, and just go off and write something of your own.
As a futuristic position paper, Walden II was a great success. Communes began springing up all over America, and people recognized Skinner's fictional society to be a real possibility. A cult of Skinnerians began to develop, young people mostly, who saw Skinner as a visionary. But Skinner himself never intended to develop a cult, only to foster an idea.
Well, here we are. This is his hut. And discovered. Now, in an operant laboratory, we have three things: the situation, the behavior, and the consequence. We call those the contingencies of reinforcement, and they are arranged by very elaborate apparatus.
The disciples of Skinner, if I may use the expression, were disciples of an idea. The disciples of Pavlov were disciples of a man. Pavlov's influence was personal, intimate, frequently in a group situation. Skinner's influence was an influence of the intellect, frequently at a distance, sometimes without any knowledge of the individual as a person.
I reply that it is because only a few scientists possess creativity.
Skinner's Technology of Teaching is an important book. There is contained within it not only a philosophy of education, if you will, but also a practical example of the application of this philosophy.
And I said I had a machine.
Within this book is an account of his early work in the area of programmed instruction, which was a landmark for psychologists, for educators in the world today.
Could make his answer here with little holes in the paper, and if he had the right answer, he would turn and produce a new problem. If he didn't, he'd have to set it all over again until he got the right answer. It was a very feasible kind of thing, and several other models have been made. Like
one of the things that I think Skinner's work has done is to bring behavior analysis, all of the material that has been put together in this system of approach to human behavior, into the practical application of teaching in the classroom. I would venture to say that maybe 5 or 6, 7 years ago, not very many psychologists could, in fact, be very helpful to the teacher, except for giving tests or for making some remarks about the general characteristics of a child. But now, with these principles in mind and the conception of teaching as a procedure whereby you arrange an environment for the child to learn, it makes it relatively easy for a well-trained psychologist who knows behavioral principles to go in and look at a child and raise very powerful questions about whether the material he is getting is appropriate for his competence, whether or not he is being properly reinforced, whether or not the conditions under which he is supposed to learn are in fact optimum for his learning ability.
The Skinnerian classroom is one in which each child is treated as an individual. He is given his own set of tasks, allowed to proceed at his own rate of learning, and receives token rewards for each successful effort. The children seen here have failed to respond to the standard educational system. But here, given an educational environment built on individual incentives and bolstered by specific Skinnerian reinforcement, they are succeeding.
Right? 3 skips in a minute. Very good. I got 1 skip.
If you take Skinner's concept of what teaching is
Write it down and back.
and apply it to the classroom, and apply it to any subject, whether it's academic or social or what have you, the notion is that education is a process whereby we arrange environments, educational environments, you want to call it that, to facilitate or expedite learning in the child. It follows from that, quite logically, that if you have arranged the circumstances well for that particular child, there isn't any reason why that child couldn't learn.
For last week, can I have some nominations?
From a primary classroom that uses token rewards almost as a game, the children then graduate to a transitional classroom. Here in a kind of halfway house into the public school system, the rewards become more complex and more subtle.
Okay, we'll put
Here an election is in progress, demonstrating how peer reinforcement also becomes part of the learning incentive.
citizenship qualities. Clarence?
Well, I think this was good by helping us kids, like helping us do tests like yesterday and stuff.
You pass one out to everybody? Yeah.
Many times people say, well, this behavioral approach, both in its applied or basic sense, is all right for simple forms of action. It's all right for habit stuff, habit learning. But when it comes to the more complex things in life, the more ethereal things, if you will, then this approach really can't make much of a contribution. It can't really do very much for it. And I've sort of heard that over and over, many ways and many times. And then, as we learn how to apply it to more and more complex problems, then it is revealed that it's effective. And now people say, well, what is its contribution to things like creativity, for example? Or what is its contribution to an artist creating a special a painting or playing a musical instrument or something of the sort? Or what about problem solving? Or what about thinking and so on? And Skinner has written on these topics, and there are just a whole host of other psychologists, particularly in the child field, who are working on this and are making very fine progress in the most complex forms of behavior that anyone can think of or anybody wants to discuss.
Today, psychologists, psychiatrists, doctors, teachers, even industrialists look to behavior modification as a means of bolstering human potential. As with any new science, behavior modification grows and changes with each new application. But the growing number of applications suggests it is here to stay. Dentists are using it to allay patients' fears, marriage counselors to instill cooperative attitudes, social workers to develop hidden potential in the mentally disturbed.
It's supposed to punish people. And I really would like to get this out in the open. And Dennis.
Well, yeah, I think that one of the most useful aspects of the behaviorist point of view is that it allows us to think of abnormal behavior in other terms than an underlying sickness. It allows us to define behavioral disorders in terms of, I guess, excessive behaviors or deficient behavior.
But behavior modification is not only for those concerned with emotional problems. Today it is being pioneered in treating physical ailments as well.
Okay, Karen. Look at me, Karen. Look at me.
Here at Kennedy Memorial Hospital, the principles of behavior modification are being applied to the treatment of epilepsy. Karen, on whom medication has failed, is learning to control her own seizures through a carefully planned system of exercises and rewards.
You did so well. That's good. We'll open it when you earn all the money, okay? Okay. Close your eyes. Now pretend you can close your eyes now. Got your eyes closed? Okay. Pretend you're in Dunkin' Donuts and Nanny's buying you a donut. Okay? Can you see that? Do you see what she's wearing?
Yeah,
What is she wearing?
a dress.
What kind of dress? What color? What color is it?
Green.
Green? Very good, Karen. Here. You did a good job. Take one. Okay, that's good. You did well today.
It is a complex system. First, she is taught to imagine pleasurable scenes as a way of relaxing her body. Then she is taught to tense her muscles, exerting contrary control.
Your eyes. Okay. Now, who's in the room? Can you tell me who's in the room there at home in your bedroom? Nana. Who else do you see up in your bedroom walking around? Any of your brothers and sisters?
No.
Yeah? They're not up there now, huh? Okay. Okay. Let's pretend you're walking up there. All of a sudden, you feel funny in your head, and boom, you fall down. Oh, you forgot to tense. Karen, tell me, does anybody come over and look at you or talk to you? No, no one comes over, Karen, when you fall down. So you get right back up, you go downstairs, and go out to play with the rest of your brothers and sisters. That was a good one. That was a real good one. Kept your eyes closed. Why don't you get yourself a nice point?
When this kind of control can be effectively applied against the tide of a seizure, she is profusely rewarded. On the other hand, when she does succumb to a seizure, she is fairly ignored.
Get yourself a bit to eat. Okay? Here you go. Right there. Give yourself a point. You don't want to put it in the wrong place. You can stop yourself from falling down by tensing. Okay, here it comes. Look at that. You didn't fall down. That was a good one. You stopped yourself.
It is complex, yet childishly simple. The fact and the fantasy of rewards becoming a reason for the patient to improve.
You didn't fall down. That was a real, whoa! That was a real good one.
Today, cardiologists are finding that heart patients can be trained through similar means to control their actual heart rate, thus warding off impending attacks. And as for Karen, whose condition was formally diagnosed as fatal, behavior modification promises to prolong and improve her chances for a better life.
Inside, you want to put it over here. Good.
I think we ought to talk about next is some of the great contributions have been derived from Skinner's work and behaviorism. So we ought to really talk about that. Right.
Well, as a sociologist, the most important contribution of Skinner's work to my work is that it enables me, or his ideas enable me to look at the social systems around me, whether they're families or schools, mental hospitals, political systems, legal systems, even the economic system, and describe what I think are the most important structural variables in those systems. At the same time, though, those principles enable me at least to think about how to design or redesign systems to the benefit of individuals, which we've been trying to do with families, to try and reverse the kinds of exchanges that have existed in those families, which ended up teaching the kids and parents how best to keep each other from living a happy life, and reverse them so that the kids start learning to participate in families and the parents start learning how to teach their kids.
He used to put his hands on his ears and used to run back and forth on the right across the floor or slam himself against the door.
Flapping his hands, things like that.
He used to put his fingers in his ears and things like, weird things.
How did those things make you feel? How often did he do them?
I mean, he was doing them all the time. He was driving us crazy.
Did those things stop you from trying to teach him, or?
Yeah, well, we really couldn't.
We had a hard time at first, to break him out of the habit, and then as we started to work with him on different things, he just similarity forgot about him. He just stopped doing those things, and he was more interested in the things that we were trying to do for him.
Before you start, Green, why don't we go over and I'll show you how to work the machine, videotape machine.
Behavior modification applied to the family is a means of creating an environment of group awareness.
Very good.
Here, a family is taught with the use of a videotape machine how they best respond to and reinforce each other, and how to best cope with an educably mentally retarded child. After each lesson, they will watch themselves through a playback of their behavior on a videotape machine, spotting the moments when they achieved their desired results and analyzing what they did to bring this about.
Say soap. 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 Look at Daddy. Come on. Soap.
And?
Why?
No, we did. Look at Mommy. Did.
It is not uncommon that the mentally handicapped are treated with punitive measures rather than reward by those who attempt to shape their behavior. What the videotape playback technique demonstrates beyond any doubt is that positive reinforcement, not punishment, is the most effective consequence to human response.
Sheep.
Attaboy.
Good.
That's a good boy, Gary.
What's that? Monkey.
The behavioral approach, by teaching them in very small steps, leading to very complex behaviors on their part, taught them principles of learning and teaching that have been developed and investigated by Skinner and his co-workers for so many decades, starting with eye contact, going to motor skills, and then to speech, complex speech. Their child, Gary, is now able to participate in the family and in schools.
Seems to be very happy doing it, though. You know,
Yeah.
Scott? Like he's right there with it.
Well, the whole question of what to do about the family in American life, of course, is a very important one. I believe that the applied behavior analysis in the family has already made great contributions. We get very careless in the way in which we treat others we're living closely with, and we can improve that by shifting from the careless, punitive measures we're so likely to resort to because they seem to work instantly, and turn to the positive effects which are associated with love and affection, which in the long run have much more powerful positive effects and would make for a much more harmonious family unit. If you don't need to go very far in looking into an ordinary family to see the extent to which careless, punitive practices enter in. I think that those who counsel families, I do not, but those who do, have been making a great contribution in getting them to, first of all, to be aware of how many punitive sanctions they impose, and then to see the possibilities and the very great achievements which are possible when you shift to positive reinforcement.
I think it's very helpful if people know exactly what they want.
She seems to be bothered. Something's on her mind.
It is basic to Dr. Skinner and his colleagues that the family unit is all important.
Hold it in, not give expression to it. And there have been times when I have felt that she, something was bothering her, maybe about something outside the home or something that I have done. And
in order for a marriage to succeed, however, there must be mutual rewards. And here Dr. Richard Stewart is applying behavioral principles as a technique of marital intervention in an effort to help each partner in the marriage determine what words and actions are most reinforcing to the other.
Do you think that you should tell him all of the things that trouble you?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, I agree. Couples should tell each other those things.
A lot of the objection to Skinner centers around that the system really doesn't work. That is, that the behavior modification doesn't work. That's not an honest objection to a system, in my judgment. It would be much more interesting philosophically to ask the question, how do we feel about this behavior modification business if it really worked? If when you went into the doctor and said, look, I've got troubles, I don't feel well, I'm unhappy, I'm not working efficiently, and I pull out my eyebrows in addition to everything else, and with a little behavior modification or a lot, what have you, he cured you.
Tonight, Mrs. Nickerson.
At the Tufts School of Dental Medicine, doctors are using Skinnerian techniques to help solve the problems of patients' fears. Fear, like any other emotion, grows stronger or weaker depending on the reinforcement. And through a procedure known as fear reduction, patients are finding that their anxieties are diminished.
Treated behaviorally.
Well, he had a bad dental experience when he was about 5, and he was 9 when I brought him to Dr. Fagioni. And we had spent the time in between with about 6 different dentists. All were unable to treat him because he would not accept the Novocaine, and he had this fear of dentists, and he would put up, quite a bit of resistance. And
all right, Kyle. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to begin to relax, and that's done by concentrating on one thing. I'd like you to pick something out to concentrate on and just devote all of your attention to that, and just start letting your body feel like it's going to relax. For the next few moments now, I'd like you to maintain that relaxation and open your eyes, and I'm going to show you something. I'm holding in my hand an empty dental syringe, and I'd like you to examine it.
The processes you are watching include shaping and systematic desensitization.
See what it's all about?
The session begins with progressive relaxation, then phases into successive approximation. This means simply that the acts which bring about fear and anxiety are approximated while the patient is in a state of controlled relaxation.
Okay? I'm going to hold this in my hand, and I'm going to hold that in my hand, and I'd like you to relax now. I'm going to hold it in 3 positions around your face. May I do that? Okay. Position 1. That's good. You're nice and relaxed. I can feel it. Good. Position 2. And position 3. How do you feel?
Good.
Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I want you to take the cap off of that, and I want you to feel the tip of that needle, because there's no tip on that needle at all. Just pull that right off. That's right. You see, there's no point on that. Okay, and I'm going to try that same position. May I try that? Good. Okay, let the mouth come open nice and relaxed. Good.
Formerly, children resistant to dentists were merely punished or forced into cooperation. With these techniques, the persuasion is all positive.
Just rest it on there. That's good. Okay, you did very well, Kyle. I think after this kind of training, you should be able to allow a dentist to try these procedures.
Well, I think the whole concept of behavior modification now is suffering from something which has plagued us all along, namely the conspicuousness of the consequences of punitive or coercive methods. We have used them for thousands of years because we get quick results, whereas the kind of educational change that can be brought about through positive techniques doesn't excite anyone. The subtle uses of positive reinforcement, which are much more effective, much more humane, are having tremendous effect.
At the Spaulding Youth Center, positive reinforcement is again accomplishing things otherwise attempted only through discipline. Here, autistic children learn to communicate and acquire social skills through the system of lessons and rewards pioneered by B.F. Skinner.
Good, John. John, one more. What's this?
First and foremost, we'd like Spaulding to be a prototype, a place where all of the ingredients of a good behavior management program can work together. Teaching in the school and behavior management in the cottages, a complete sort of small community where children can have the benefit of a standardized behavioral diet all through their days that they're awake. Then, next, we'd like to see Spaulding develop curricula specifically in self-management and in self-control, kind of curricula that enable kids to learn from somebody who is not a professional teacher.
That's good boy, Paul. That's right. Oh, Paul, what word is this? Bat. Bat. Good, Paul. What word is this? Man. Man. Good.
Wow, the possibilities really come right out of Skinner's work. The possibilities for working with non-professionals or low-level professionals in a place like Spaulding or anywhere. We've had people here have come in with training in other fields, other areas, and have said, I'll do it. I'm here to be in the country, but I really don't think I can do it, frankly. I worked with kids before, and nothing really substantial has changed. And people walk out of here saying, I've got some tools for the first time. Or parents will say, my God, I've got some tools. You know,
It is these tools and techniques that spring from the work of B.F. Skinner. Today, his former students are scattered all across the country, applying his principles of behavior modification to various disciplines and scientific fields.
When Skinner came to Harvard in 1948 or thereabouts, he did teach one course in the general education program called Science in Human Behavior. The challenge of that course was to tell students who had no particular interest in psychology and no desire to become psychologists themselves, to tell those students what psychology had to say to people in general. And it was, I think, in the effort of putting together a coherent set of lectures to that audience that Skinner moved from the professional, specialized academic psychologist to the cultural figure he has become.
About the philosophy of free will, rather the behavior of a man who believes that he's free.
Some sort of rule has been passed in certain states that a patient in a hospital cannot be deprived of services and goods he would normally receive in order that they be used as reinforcers. As if he has been free to go to breakfast, you cannot ask him to earn points to buy his breakfast. And this, I think, is your point. It must you deprive him of breakfast so that he will earn those points so that he can get breakfast. Well, if you take care of the psychotic, for example, as the basic principle, then you would say, yes, this man has a right to food. But if you're looking ahead to this person as a person, then he has a right also to live a productive life. And in the institution where he gets everything he needs, there are no reinforcers, and he deteriorates. He is destroyed as a person. So if you reinstate the kinds of conditions that would prevail in the world at large, where he does work for his breakfast, you do him a favor. You improve his condition. I would say it's not aversive at all.
Part of the controversy around Skinner, I think, is very much like the controversy that surrounded Darwin in the 19th century and Copernicus in the 17th century. And in both of those older cases and in this one, Skinner, in both of those older cases and in this one, a source of controversy arises when someone comes along and says to people, you're not as important as you thought you were. Now, Copernicus said that the Earth is not the planet around which the other planets move. And people got very cross about that because they liked to think that their planet was the central planet. After a while, they got used to the idea that we were just another one of the planets, like one of the boys out on the side there. Then Darwin said to people, and made them very angry, your body, your very being is not that special. It didn't take a special act of the good Lord. You can believe in the good Lord, but evolution is what made you. The good Lord maybe got this whole thing started, but natural selection produced man. And what Skinner is saying is he's invading now the most private of all places, the mind itself. And he's saying that isn't your private preserve either. Not only your planet and your body, but even your mind belongs to science and can be controlled and can be shaped and can be molded, and I can control it, he says, what's more. And that's alarming, to say the least.
In the world of science and academia, Skinner is a household word. Yet no matter how well-known he becomes or how widespread his techniques, there is always the maddening stigma of the mad scientist creating robots to respond to his every command. Many feel it began with the creation of the air crib, a total environment in which his younger daughter spent her infancy, which many people misunderstood and thought to be some kind of experiment. In fact, Skinner has never experimented on humans in any way. His subjects are limited to pigeons and rats.
I think it's completely unfair that people criticize him for bringing up his child in a box. It was, for instance, if my father had been an insurance salesman or something, nobody would have raised an eyebrow. The fact that he was involved with experiments with animals, people assumed that because I was in an unusual shaped device for sleeping and playing, they immediately came to the conclusion that he was experimenting on me. The environment was controlled, all right, it was controlled, but not for the purpose of changing my behavior, but for keeping me comfortable and healthy and happy. I liked it. It was a larger area to sleep and play in. I could look out, and I was not in it all the time. I think that's another misconception.
To his critics, Skinner is indifferent, shrugging it off with the remark that he and Darwin have shared the worst press in history. At the core of his work is a quest for human adjustment and happiness, attainable through the understanding and control of one's environment. Misunderstood as he may be, when history makes its final judgment, there's little doubt that he will emerge as the acknowledged leader of one of the most influential movements of our age.